Emily Severry.
Arlene Schofield.
My name is Shireen Snow.
My name is Carla A. Miles.
Diana Camuto.
This is Christine Dunford.
I'm me, Eden.
Caroline Macy. This is Walker Fannin.
Lydia Camille Dixon.
I'm Sarah Dates Wardam.
My name is Linda Preston, and you're watching the Keith Andrew Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Keith Andrew Network. This is episode 426. I'm here with a good friend of mine, James Gavin, and I just want to say thank you for being a guest on my talk show.
Well, it's a pleasure to be asked. Thank you, Keith.
Yeah, the honor's all mine. For people who want to know what is the whole point of my talk show, the whole point of my talk show is to show people that even with having a learning disability, I can still amount to something. And at the same time, I'm able to turn myself into an example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities and disabilities to never give up and to prove people wrong. To show them labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be. And to prove to them, hashtag, you can break the labels. So that being said, half hour, 37 minutes of your time. Say anything you want, curse if you want to. Excuse me, I can't lose my voice. Freedom of speech, freedom of self-expression. Say anything you want, do whatever you want. And starting off, what can you tell us about yourself?
Well, I've been a full-time self-employed freelance writer for 20, excuse me, with some winter cold. Here in New York, it is like breathing in fire. It's been so cold, but I'll be okay. I've been at this now for 27 years. Goodness gracious. My first book was published in 1991. That is a history of cabaret called Intimate Nights, the Golden Age of New York Cabaret, a great passion of mine for almost my whole adult life. And once that book came out, I was off and running. That was September of 1991, and in February of 1992, I had my first article published in the New York Times. There have been many, many since then. And I've written various other books. I went on to write a biography of Chet Baker, a biography of Lena Horne, and then a biography of Peggy Lee, and I am now working on a biography of George Michael. Complicated lives, all of them. Great artists.
That's nice. And you have a nice studio set up behind you.
This is the apartment on the Upper West Side of New York where I have been living for almost as long as I have been writing full-time. And they will take me out of here on a stretcher.
Well, while on the subject, how is it on the you said West Side, right?
How is it on the Upper West Side? It is a very family-oriented neighborhood. So the streets, it's largely residential, and the streets are filled with babies and strollers, and either young moms or the nursemaids of young moms. I live a block away from Central Park, and so I really should go to Central Park more than I do. It's right outside my door. It's fairly tranquil up here, and I love the Upper West Side. And as I say, I probably will never leave, not unless forced.
Well, if you don't mind me for asking it, trying to find the words for it, so drawing a blank. House to rent, because I was kind of curious about moving to the city. The little things about it kind of turned me off about the city, the whole terrorist thing. But you have terrorists everywhere, unfortunately. would be nice to get rid of them. But, you know, from you being in the city, like, I'll give you an example I'm trying to mean. Like, I was born and raised in the suburbs. You know, from Upper West Side, I'm about an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. If you ever been to Woodbury Commons in the Catskills?
I've been to the Catskills many times, but never to that part.
Well, if you come to Woodbury Commons, you should definitely hang out. So, when Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, please continue.
And I didn't mean to interrupt, I apologize.
Problem.
And, so when I do venture into the city with my parents, you know, it's really nice, you know, it's fast paced. And then I see the transition from when you leave to the city and now you coming back into the suburbs. It's kind of like a different way of life. You know, I've been up here for 30 years. I would like to move to the city, but for me, it's more like a culture shock, if you agree.
Well, that culture shock is something I've never experienced because I was born in Manhattan and the rhythm of New York is in my blood. It feels strange for me to go anyplace else that is less frenetic than New York because this is just the way I move and think. I walk faster than anybody on the street, and I'm in love with this city. I consider New York to be the safest city in the world. I remember, my memory stretches back to a time when I felt a lot of fear walking around on many streets at night, but that is gone. There's a lot about gentrification that revolts me and disturbs me deeply, and there are certain aspects of it, such as increased safety, that I think are really great. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
And it's not my choice anyway. I still find endless fascination in New York City. The artistic spirit of this city is formidable, and people who come here with some kind of artistic dream to live out tend to find a way to make it happen. Maybe I'm overstating the case because not all dreams come true in this city, but an awful lot of them do. And the people who are really determined to get their cabaret act on, to sing, to get their esoteric off-Broadway show mounted, to dance, to do any number of things, the people who are good and really determined tend to make a little bit of noise, or a lot of noise.
I agree with you, and you know, I use my brother for an inspiration. He thinks I'm an ass kisser, and he's like, "Oh, why you want?" Because I say to my family, "Oh, I can just take a taxi, you know, $137. You take me straight there. I can choke down the money, then I can work in a retail job what I'm doing and pay it back." And he's like, "Oh, why don't you take the bus? The bus is realistic, $34." And I can see myself going down to part of 40 and then having reality slap me in the face saying, "Shit, I'm 2 hours away from home. I've never been to the city on my own. I don't know I find my way out of a wet paper bag." So if I went down with someone to the city a couple times, say if you wanted to hang out, you show me the city, then it will sink in for me. But just saying, "Here's a bus ticket, go explore." Well, my dad and my sister likes making a joke, "You're never going to see Keith again." But, you know, it's like the culture shock is saying, yeah, I can wander wherever I want when Monroe, Harriman, Chester, whatever you want to call it, because I've been here for 30 years. If you say go to Manhattan or the Upper West Side to go visit you, I'll be like, okay, where's the GPS? Because I don't know where I'm going.
But the streets are numbered. The streets are in a grid format, and so in most of Manhattan, it is hard to get lost. Yeah. Furthermore, Manhattan, as I said before, is a really safe place these days. There's virtually not a street in this city that I would be afraid to walk on in the middle of the night. Maybe East Harlem, Spanish Harlem, the last time I was there was a little bit dicey, but no place else. I mean, Avenue A, B, C, and D used to be a deadly place to live, and now they're gentrified and expensive and exclusionary and all of that. And I love the fact that New York is so safe, but with that safety have come prices to pay, and it's now prohibitively expensive for more people than not. Living in a rent-stabilized apartment, thank God, I got in on the end of that. I don't own this place, but I'm really in love with this city, and I have tremendous wanderlust. I travel a lot. I travel pretty fearlessly. I haven't been to the Belgian Congo or deepest, darkest, uncivilized, I don't know where, Africa, but I would go in a heartbeat if I could. Because I like to travel anywhere in the U.S., out of the U.S., big cities, small cities, suburban places, cosmopolitan places, places where languages are spoken that I don't know. Brazil is my special place, so I travel there more than anywhere else, except for Los Angeles, where I'm going next week. I love Los Angeles. I have deep relationships with a lot of places, but I could never imagine living happily anywhere but in New York.
No, I agree with you. You know, it's nice where I'm living. It's just, I'll give you an example, and then we can go to the next question. And you did answer the question I was going to ask, I looked you up, you said you traveled well, that's really nice. And he did answer that question. I mean, among the other question. But I was going to ask you, you know, where I am, it's nice. Say you and your wife who moved up and you have a young son, you know, there's a school, there's a park, there's entertainment, and once you get to my age or your age, you kind of realize there's really nothing here unless you're raising a family. So for me, being 30 years old, it's kind of like I'm looking on the outside in and just saying, you're 30 and you're on the inside looking out. So it's kind of like you're seeing two different point of views.
I understand. When I was about 16 years old, now I was adopted, and so I wasn't in Manhattan very long after I was born, and was swept off to Yonkers, Westchester, and where my mother still lives. My father's gone now. And grew up fascinated with New York City and the idea of New York City sophistication and smarts and nightlife and theater and all of those things that I wanted so much to be a part of. And when I was 16 years old, I went, my dear cousin John drove me into Manhattan for my first serious trip to Manhattan. And it was a rainy night, and we were walking around in Greenwich Village. It was a Wednesday night, not many people on the streets. And it was just the sense of being in the Emerald City. As soon as my feet hit the ground, I felt like some magical force was coursing through my entire body from head to toe. And I knew that this was the place that I had to be. And so in the early 80s, I began to take bus trips from Yonkers into New York. There was a bus that went up South Broadway where I lived and crossed through Riverdale and then went down Fifth Avenue and took me into Midtown on Fifth Avenue. And I had the most overwhelming sense of identification with where I was. The city was quite a bit different back then. And even though every new generation complains that the big city is not what it used to be when they were young, I felt at the time that there was just an extraordinary wealth of excitement, stimulation, mystery, danger, and experience and history and all the things that I really love, and music, live music, of course, which I strenuously sought out along with used books, used CDs, new CDs, and all that. And so I began working on my cabaret book when I was 20 years old and a junior at Fordham University in the Bronx. And when I was 27, that book came out. But when I was 22, which was right after I had graduated from Fordham, I moved to New York, and that to the Upper West Side, in fact, and that's where I've been ever since. So I have the blessing of focus in my life and ambition. I knew what I wanted from a pretty early age, and I went for it. And most of it has come true.
Yeah, that's really cool. Now,
I think.
Remind me, I have done my interviews as of late, so I'm kind of like having a mental block. But I'm just staring at the bookcase behind you, and it reminds me of something that I had in my school. We had the audiovisual department. Now, the question I was going to ask you is, are you into the audiovisual area, and what made you decide to go for that look? Because it's a nice look you have, so it's kind of keeping my interest on that. It's giving me flashbacks.
Well, I am of my generation and age in that I love physical objects of things. I love vinyl. I love CDs. I love DVDs. I love the physical object of a book. And I find that being surrounded by all of this stuff is very stimulating to me, and it makes me feel safe and at home. I spent a great deal of my extreme youth in libraries and bookstores. When I was my first official part-time job when I was 16 years old was in a bookstore in a shopping center in Yonkers. And for the next several years, I've worked at a number of different bookstores, and I just love being surrounded by this stuff. And I respect the attitude that many, many young people have, which is one of travel and light, of not needing to be weighed down by objects, of music being an ephemeral thing that you rent and that streams onto your phone and all of that. I think that having lightness in life and not being burdened down by things is a good thing. It's just not the path that I chose, because I love my stuff. It's my own research library. This is the world that I write about. I like being able to pull things right off of the shelf and reference them or listen to them. I think as time goes on, I will divest myself of many objects that no longer have meaning in my life. But right now they have great meaning. I just love having them around me.
No, I agree with you, and I argue with a couple of people, I won't mention names, say, you know, like I said, I'm the same way. I like holding a CD, I like, holding a book, physical objects. I'm not really into the whole digital downloading BS. It's saying, oh, you want something, you can watch it, just download it. But here's the thing, a CD or a book you can take anywhere with you. Say the power goes out, that's fine. You pop in the batteries, here's a DVD, you watch it, you're entertained. If you download it and you have no internet, or if the file gets corrupted, you're pretty much shit out of luck. But so I like staying with the actual, here's this, or here's a case, something you can hold. When you download it and it goes into the cloud or whatever, it's kind of like ridiculous.
Well, the computer that I'm speaking to you on at this moment has 19,000 songs on it. That is a mere fraction of what I own. Those are just the 19,000 songs that I cannot be without at all times. When I'm on an airplane, and don't have access to the internet, I have my iPod Classic, a now discontinued object that has all of those songs on it. Downloading is even antiquated right now. People aren't even downloading anymore. They're just streaming, which is renting your music and, yes, being beholden to an internet signal. I don't want to deal with that. So I like having things. I like making my own playlists. I think that streaming services are great in the sense that they can introduce you to a lot of music you've never heard before. I do not need that. I have so many. My ears are wide open all the time. I'm bombarded with new music, and I have my own playlists and my own taste to follow. And so I have, in this apartment alone, I would have enough music to keep me satisfied for the next 5 lifetimes.
No, I agree. Now, the next question I was going to ask you is, you mentioned you're a public speaker. Who influenced you to become a public speaker, and what are your words of wisdom for people who want to become a public speaker?
I think that's a good question. I've never thought of that before. Along with my fascination with old music when I was growing up, came an equal enrapturement with old radio, old-time radio, back from the 30s through the 50s primarily. I love the theater of the mind, and I love the human voice. The human voice is one of my great passions in life, singing or speaking. I am fascinated with the ability of the voice to communicate feelings and information. And so my public speaking career, in air quotes, came about because in 2002, my Chet Baker book, my Chet Baker biography called Deep in a Dream, was published. And I was asked by a friend of mine named Barbara McGurn, who was who programmed the cabaret at the Oak Room of the Algonquin Hotel here in New York. And she was doing an author's series in the Oak Room, and she asked me if I wanted to do something on Chet Baker, and I said, yeah, I'd love to, but just me getting up and speaking in telling the story of Chet Baker does not seem enough. And so I put together the idea of me narrating a show. I would be up there telling stories and providing a through line wrapped around performances of the songs that Chet Baker immortalized. I did it. And I called upon jazz singer and cabaret friends of mine, an actor or two, and it took off from there, and I found that I really loved telling stories into a microphone in front of a group of people. And I've been doing it ever since. We've done versions of that Chet Baker show maybe, I would say, 20 times over the years. But the show that I had the most success with was a Lena Horne show, in which the great Mary Wilson, founding member of the Supremes, marvelous solo singer, sang the songs of Lena Horne, and I told the story of Lena Horne with a jazz trio and with video of Lena and still images of Lena throughout. And we've done that show all over the country and abroad. We've done it in Barbados, we've done it in Australia a couple of times. And that show and the experience of working with Mary were one of the joys, too, of the joys of my life. And so I have shows based on all of my books. I've also given lectures. I've talked over the years a lot on the radio. And so I'm a storyteller. I love telling stories and sharing things that I've learned with people. And so in terms of advice to people who would like to do the same thing that I'm doing, I would say develop your public speaking skills to the maximum. Listen to people who speak beautifully and try to emulate them. And good diction is very, very important. I love language. I love when language is treated respectfully. I love communication in all its forms. And you have to have your technical skills down. It's like writing or dancing or singing or doing anything. You need to know your stuff. You have to learn how to hone your instrument and your communication skills to the utmost. And so that's what I do. I've been able to do public speaking as an offshoot of my writing. And I love sound. I mean, right now we can see each other, which is a wonderful thing. But there's also great beauty in simply listening and imagining a person based on the sounds that you're hearing. It's almost like a nighttime campfire experience, telling stories, sometimes scary stories, but very atmospheric stories about places you haven't been and people you don't know. And you imagine it all inside of your mind. The human voice can do spectacular things to communicate all of what I'm talking about. So that's it. I would like to do much more of it than I do, but in the course of every year I have numerous opportunities to talk to people. I love it.
No, absolutely. With that being said, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you one more subject, and I'm going to pass the show over to you.
Vince Russo.
Me, Mark Medley.
Hi everybody, this is Mark Neely.
Barry Papick.
This is Peter Bruno.
My name is Kyle Collier.
This is Julio Santiago, better known as Dynamite.
I'm Richard Epcar.
Orange Chow.
This is Kerrigan Mahan.
This is Goldar.
And we both support
Keith Andrew.
My name is Ron Wasserman, and I am supporting Keith Andrew on what he is doing, and you better do the same, or I'm going to come kick your ass.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Keith Andrew Network. I am your host, Keith Andrew. Along here it's James Gavin, and this is episode 426. With the last 10 minutes left of the show, actually 11 minutes, I'm going to ask you the one last hard-hitting question I was going to ask you, then I'm going to pass the show over to you. You can ask me anything you want, and basically, hey, supporting the cause, making a new friend out of it. So with that being said, for all my card away, but the first question I was going to ask you is, you mentioned you were a journalist and author. Who influenced you to become a journalist, and what was your very first book you wrote?
The first book that I wrote is the one that I mentioned earlier, called Intimate Nights, The Golden Age of New York Cabaret. And that grew out of my fascination with bygone New York nightlife that I would read about in old issues of the New Yorker, Q magazine, which was very popular in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And a sense of New York sophistication and excitement that I felt was out there waiting for me if only I could find it. A lot of it at that point was in the past. The glory days of cabaret in New York were in 1984, when I undertook that book, not at their peak. The best was behind us, and I wanted to live them vicariously, talk to the people that had been pivotal in that world, the eyewitnesses, the participants, and most of them were still alive to talk to. I began writing, I guess, because when I was a high school student in Yonkers, I found that I had an aptitude for putting sentences together. And I was getting compliments from teachers of mine that suggested that I might be able to do something with this. And so when I was in college and wondering what the hell am I going to do with my life, I had my passion for music, singers primarily. I had my passion for writing. I had my passion for old New York City and the things that went on there at night. And I had my enduring love for radio and for storytelling. And I put them all together when I decided to go forward with this book. My writing professor, Verlin Klinkenberg, in college, I had a writing tutorial with him, and one day I said to him, gee, no one has ever written a book about all of those wonderful old nightclubs that used to be all over New York. And wouldn't it be great if somebody did? And he said, why don't you? And those 3 words gave me my life, because I instantly knew that this is what I had to do. And with all the bravado of youth, I went for it. There was, to answer another of your questions, though, I'm a big lover of Truman Capote, and there was a story that he wrote called One Christmas, not to be confused with A Christmas Memory, which he wrote in the 60s. One Christmas is from the 80s, and it's the last published book, and it's a story, not a book, but it's the last published piece that he had in his lifetime. Stuff came out after he was gone. This story is a story that I read and get choked up by every single Christmas. It's a story about a sad childhood Christmas that he spent. And it touches me so much. I think that the writing and the storytelling are really perfection. It's written with the simplicity of a children's story. And the directness and the honesty, the heart, the pain are all right there on the surface. And I aspired to do that. And I still aspire to do what this man did in that simple but terribly sad, terribly sweet story. It's just perfect craftsmanship and perfect communication of feelings. That is one thing that made me want to be a writer. But another one, I'm known as a biographer because I've written 3 biographies. And a biography of Robert Mapplethorpe, written by a great writer named Patricia Morrisroe, for me is the perfect biography. I've read it cover to cover probably 15 times. And I still turn to that book when I am stuck in my own writing and need to see I need my way to be lit, and she always does it for me. Joan Didion was very influential on me, as she is on a lot of young writers, when I was a college kid. So I read a lot of her. I read John Updike's book reviews. He had 2 volumes of book reviews that I thought were wonderfully fatherly and encouraging and compassionate, but very smart, very, very observant book reviews, never mean. Golly, I could sit here for hours naming things that made me want to try and do that, but I was born with a lot of passion, thank God. Who knows where it comes from? But I was just very, very determined to be a storyteller, and it worked out.
No, absolutely. And the first question I was going to ask you, right behind you, is that a ladder? And where does it go?
Well, it leads up to what I call the second floor here, which is a loft that I sleep in, but that has a lot of space in it for stuff. As you can see, I've got a lot of stuff in this place. You're not seeing that half of it, believe me, but when I go up there at the end of the night, it feels like I'm in another room. And it's one of the charms of this apartment and the reason why I would never want to leave one of them.
Hey, who knows? Maybe we can get to hang out one day.
Sure, Keith. Now, what town are you in?
Oh, Central Valley, near the famous Woodbury Commons.
Ah, yes, okay. And you like it there, don't you?
It's okay. The thing is, it's about time for me to stop living at home and go venture out. But the thing is, I have a disability, so that's kind of holding me back.
Well, it hasn't held you back from doing this show. I admire you so much. You said 426 shows? That is extraordinary. I would love to do what you do, and I've just never pursued it. And I'm so impressed that you have talked to hundreds of people about their lives. It's something that probably a lot of people would like to do, but don't have the balls to do.
No, absolutely. Now, we're wrapping up our segment. I do have a couple questions for you off the air. But the two questions I want to ask you is, one, are you on social media? Are you on LinkedIn, Twitter, States for the two? How can your fans follow you? And also, when I first approached you to be a guest on my talk show, what was your first reaction when you got the email? And what made you say yes? Being completely honest, what was your reaction and what made you say yes?
My reaction was sure, and I'm so flattered when anybody wants to talk to me. I have very seldom said no to an interview request. The request has to be so unprofessionally expressed that I would be appalled to be a part of this. But for the most part, I love it when people are interested enough in something that I've done to ask. It's very flattering. It's not like I'm bombarded with these requests either, so I'm happy for the opportunity to speak with someone like you who has a sincere interest in people and what things that are going on and coming out and how they did it. That I'm delighted that you asked me. And jumping back to your previous question, though, I am not on LinkedIn because I'm not really part of the corporate world, and I didn't think that I would really need LinkedIn. I'm probably mistaken about that. It would probably be a good way to find people that I'm looking for to interview. Facebook, I adore Facebook, and I spend way too much time on Facebook. I have an Instagram account that I haven't posted to in a while. Ditto Twitter. Twitter I could never make work for me. And I just gave up interest because my tweets were getting so little traffic, and I didn't have the patience to try and build it into something. And so I am mainly a Facebook guy, but I also have a website called JamesGavin.com that is a great way to communicate with me if you so desire. And that website, which I created myself, has a lot of my work on it. It has excerpts from my books, but it has most of the articles that I've written and a lot of pictures of me in various situations. And I think it's got a lot of fun stuff, especially if you're into singers. There are a lot of profiles of singers. And lots of my hundreds of liner notes for CDs. Remember those? I do, obviously. And, so thank you for asking, though. I'm easy to find.
And then if I can talk to you off the air. But wrapping up our interview segment, it was a real honor and privilege having you as a guest. And I'm looking forward to part 2 down the road.
I love it. Thank you, Keith. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to chat with you about